circling to go live. Okay, and now let me go. Perfect. So we are live on Instagram too, but there's a way for me not to hear this audio because I don't want to hear myself twice.
Make sure you don't have two windows open and have one that's outputting us. I've made that little mistake.
Hmm, maybe that was the issue. All right, let's try. Hey, we're gonna end this one. Don't discard it. It was fine. All right, and then I will open up the window in the browser, and that way I could just mute that tab.
Mm-hmm.
Be learning on the fly.
When we get it figured out, it won't be that bad. We'll know exactly what to do, and we're up and running in 5 minutes.
Exactly. Not too bad. We're functioning. We're doing all right. Let's see. What are we calling
We're
this episode?
we're rookies. We know it, and it's okay.
Yeah, but we want to thank everyone for joining us. You want to welcome everybody to this pod while I set this up?
Sure. Have you got us live?
I mean, we're live. I was trying to set us up live on Instagram. So yeah, this part is
Oh,
still live.
okay. I didn't know you had said you were going to end something, so I thought you were ending the whole thing. I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
Well, hey everybody. This is David and Kareem here with Microsoft Unboxed. I hope everybody has had a wonderful new year, and I do apologize for our little out of sortness here. We're not rookies at technology, but we're little rookies at live streaming, and we're trying to figure out how to get all this stuff where it looks presentable for you guys and is a very enjoyable experience. So please pardon our dust, and we'll jump right on into some Microsoft news. New year, new news, and I think 2024 is going to be a big year for technology in general, and not just Microsoft. And I think this is going to be the year where some consumers are going to be happy, some are going to scream a little bit because your ways of doing things may be changing, whether you like it or not in some cases. So we'll just have to see where that lands us.
Yeah. Sorry, as you mentioned, we are just kind of setting up some stuff, but we want to thank you guys for joining us for episode 4, the beginning of the year. We are going to try and do uh, sort of a big pod, not a long one, but a big one, full of news, but all the news of last year because we're only 4 days into this year. I think 5 days into this year, and we're getting back on track with Microsoft news. So we'll have tons of stuff to talk about throughout the year. We have CES coming up. Microsoft had a big announcement about hardware that we will briefly cover probably during this pod. We have some stuff about predictions because that's what you do at the beginning of the year. You make a declarative assumption and then you backtrack all of that at the end of the year once everything was proven wrong. So we'll be doing that. Hope you guys enjoy that. We will also be doing like I said, covering the big headlines. So if you were under a rock, maybe just missed all the Microsoft news, or just want some more, conversation about it. Maybe you didn't have anyone to talk to over the break, and you want to hear some people talk about some things that you might be interested in. We're going to get started on those. Do you want to do one of your first headlines that you want to cover? Something you want to quickly talk about?
Be glad to. We'll keep this one light, and I do say that in a joking way. When you see what the headline is, we'll keep this one light. We'll keep this one simple. Guess what, folks? Do you remember the Xbox Series X refrigerator, the mini fridge back in 2021? that came out as E3 just as a marketing prop, and it really caught on. And Microsoft ended up trying to manufacture a few of them. I think they sold a few. They went for entirely too much money on the eBays of the world. Well, guess what? Now they're working with Walmart, good old Walmart, and we have the Xbox Series S toaster. Yes, we are putting the Xbox toaster on your countertop. And we'll keep it brief. It has all the basic functions. You can control how light or dark you want your toast. You can get a countdown timer. Um, if you take a look at it, the front of the toaster does mimic the vent, the black circular vent that's on the top of the Xbox Series S. The buttons are highlighted in the white and black trim that the Series S has. And this bad boy has, as of this morning, it had a 5-star rating. I'm guessing that's not maybe because it makes great toast, but, but because the fans have caught on to it. It is $39.99 at walmart.com. There's a link to where you can purchase it on the article on our site at microsoftunboxed.com. Scoot over there, check that out, get yourself a toaster. One more thing, make your kids happy. It does put the Xbox logo on the toast. So if you need to feed your kids some toast, tell them they're eating Xbox toast, and there you go.
Yeah, that's a fun one. They made a fridge
Hmm.
and they made a toaster.
Hmm.
They made a fridge and they made a toaster. I remember there being something about a toaster fridge coming from Apple about Microsoft putting those two things together and it not working out. So I wonder if this is just kind of a tongue in cheek kind of thing. Like, hey, we made the instead of making the Surface Pro, we literally made a toaster in the fridge, and we hope you people enjoy it.
So I'm wondering now if we can get a microwave. You know how back in our college days they had the combo piece of equipment. They called it
Yeah,
the micro fridge. So
that's
now if they can just give us a microwave, we'll have something.
that's what we're headed for. Either that, or we're going to be doing, maybe I think it's hip now to have an air fryer, some kind of Xbox air fryer thing with
Mhm.
the Xbox sound once it's done cooking. I'm down for that.
Yeah, that work. I've actually got an air fryer. It'd be okay if we had a little
I got one over
sound
Christmas.
effect.
Yeah, I want to cook all my unhealthy things while I game. Yeah, that's a good one. We also have what's another light one you got for us? I think you got another. Well, it's not necessarily light, but it is in the gaming avenue. Do you want to cover
Well,
that one?
yep. Unfortunately, we have E3. This came out the end of last year, and I wanted to make sure, or over the holiday season, I wanted to make sure that this got out there because it's a little bit sad, especially for those old guys like Kareem and myself. Yes, buddy, I'm sorry, but we are not as young as we used to be. We do remember things in gaming that this generation has no clue about. One of those might be E3, but unfortunately, the younger generation will not get to experience E3. The Entertainment Software Association has confirmed that E3 is no more. They made the announcement on Twitter, and the first show was 1995 in Los Angeles, where developers and publishers would show off upcoming gaming titles. The event was always open to the gaming public and press, and an all digital event was held in 2021. But the COVID pandemic did cancel the show in 2020 and 2022. So, that kind of gave the publishers a chance to do their own marketing, and maybe they don't see the same value in E3 that they used to. So, does anything replace E3, or do we continue with these micro events? I know, last year we didn't have an E3, but we did have, two or three micro events throughout the year. And I thought the micro events were actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think we continue with the micro events. I think the gaming awards had a big deal. I know that they were under a bit of controversy for not acknowledging the massive layoffs that happened throughout 2023 for a lot of the gaming studios. They kind of brushed over that in lieu of just showing you or showing us trailers, which again, most of these award shows are kind of known for. But to have an award show and to kind of crown some of these achievements without acknowledging the setbacks. Again, I understand why they might have been mired in a bit of that. Hopefully, they address it next year, and kind of tip their hat to everyone who is currently looking for jobs because it's tough. But I think overall, going back to the main topic of these mini shows, it started with I think Nintendo pulling out back in 2017, 16 or something like that. They
Yeah.
were one of the first ones because they realized that they could show what they wanted to show without having to front a ton of money, and they could control the narrative. Uh, while they weren't on the center stage with Microsoft and Sony at the time, uh, they still got the coverage, online coverage that most people who are into these events go to anyway. This isn't like it's a televised event. This isn't something that comes on at prime time at 8 o'clock on your local network, and everyone who's a layman can tune into this. This is stuff you have to search for. You have to go to YouTube to find the trailers. You have to go to your favorite gaming sites like IGN and the rest to see what the coverage is like, to see what the reviews are like. You're online. You're an active online person. I think these companies realize that they can just present it to these people with minimal cost. I think the pandemic sped that up. Sony was flirting around with it until they jumped full stream into it right around the pandemic. They pulled out as well, Microsoft being one amongst the last ones, and they also kind of started doing their own Xbox things once they kind of had a narrative to speak on. They weren't necessarily trying to sell hardware to everybody. They were trying to sell a software experience throughout those years. So it was easier to kind of shift everything to online. And I think that they're going to continue doing that going forward. Uh, it's unfortunate for everyone who is into networking because I know a lot of people perhaps got jobs this way. Swag was another thing. A lot of these companies, your studios sell stuff that isn't just a game. They sell pillows and shirts and all kind of paraphernalia and all kind of figurines, things like that. They make money on these physical tangible items that they would sell at these trade shows. That's not going to be a thing anymore. Maybe there will be pop-up shops online where you can perhaps do that. If you're promoting the next Last of Us, you alongside these trailers, you can go to some kind of studio shop to buy the things that you want. Because I know, again, like I said, that's another big avenue that doesn't get talked about. But it's unfortunate. I still enjoy watching the trailers. I like being able to kind of not have to take a day off from work. I can watch all these at the end of the day and get the same experience that all my friends are talking about who may have watched it during the day or who are watching it later in the evening or whatever and didn't have to go to the location. I live in Florida. I used to live in California where E3 was at. It was easier for me to get to. It's much harder now, but now I still get some of the benefits of seeing those trailers online. So I think it's just an unfortunate trend that this economy caught up to for this conference.
I think too there was, and I want to make sure this comes off the right way. I did see some reports that E3 had become more of an entertainment event, and people were concerned about that. I know, when E3 first become a thing, everybody made a big deal out of the E3 girls that were at each booth. And, I think over time, some of that had become a little more of an entertainment spectacle and more of I don't want to say party is the right word, but maybe a little too much fun was being had and it wasn't always focused on gaming too. And I think, Nintendo, as you said, took a look at that. Xbox took a look at that. PlayStation took a look at that. And the way we consume media has drastically changed as well. We sit down and we watch the quick TikToks, we watch the YouTube shorts, we watch the YouTube videos, and we're able to leave comments and we're able to interact. And you got to think these companies can reach more people that way. They're getting
Yeah, I mean,
bang for their dollar.
it was also as you mentioned, the E3 girls. I remember Microsoft getting caught up in this too because it was problematic. The idea is to make gaming as inclusive as possible, and that was a thing of a relic that wasn't inclusive. So when you start to pull and extract yourself from those certain aspects of the conference, you start to realize what actually is important, what is inclusive, what gets the message across, and maximizes the potential for more people to play the game. And it's just showing the people the game. All of the superfluous stuff around it can be to be cut away. And again, when inflation is high, the price tag of things are going up. I'm sure every company is looking at which conferences can we cut out that we can make digital. And Microsoft's still doing this beyond gaming,
Yeah,
Ignite,
Bill.
build stuff like that. Everything's becoming hybrid, and at some point, it will probably just be all digital. So E3, unfortunately, was the first of them to get the full axe, but I predict, unfortunately, more will fall to the wayside as well.
I'm not so sure CES doesn't end up digital even at some point. I know, CES is I'm going to use the acronym Consumer Electronics Show, and there's a lot more there than PCs, computers, gaming, and software. There's TVs, stereos, DVDs, and, anything entertainment related.
Vehicles, yeah.
Yeah, vehicles, and even then, you got to think. Take a TV manufacturer for example. They say this is the year that TVs are going to easily eclipse 100 inches. And, Linus had the 115-inch TV up for review on his channel. And then there was one, Unbox Therapy. I'm going to give them a little shout. They had one this week that was over 100 inches. Now, think about it, folks. The money, the shipping, the care that has to be done, the money spent to get one demo unit, just one, of one product. Now, these companies have dozens of products, but the money that it takes to bring that 100-inch screen in safely, set it up as a demo, then tear it down and ship it back. And I think we'll eventually see the CESs of the world. Maybe they have little breakout events for things that you need to see, but I think they will be more localized to the company, and everything else is going to be digital online.
I could see a little bit of that. I think CES, like to your point, is going to take much longer because a lot of these companies don't have the same cachet as a Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo can garner. So for Lenovo or even Dell to a certain extent, like you're not going to be scouring the internet on a random Thursday evening to hear about Dell's new XPS lineup. They need CES to be the event to be like, oh, I saw this concept car alongside the new Dell XPS lineup, and that's how I know about that, and that's how I know that's what I want to save my money for the rest of this year. Again, you're right now. Microsoft can command like, hey, we're going to be presenting the Surface. And people are going to be like, all right, well, I know them for Office and stuff like that. They're saying they're having an event. I'll check it out. Same thing. Apple does an amazing job. They can command everyone's attention to be like, hey, we're just going to put up a logo for an hour and a half and we want you guys to watch it. People will go see that because they have the ability to do that. But a lot of these other companies will have to figure out a way to become that before they can start, branching off and making these sort of judgments. But we won't belabor that anymore. We have a lot to talk about. Let's get on to the Microsoft news of 2024. I'm going to start off with probably the biggest news and the one that was taking up most of our air, which was them closing the Activision Blizzard deal. I'm going to let you, if you want to kind of give everyone the highlights, or just give them the TLDR kind of thing, because I have some details about specific dates and all that kind of things that went down for this deal.
Well, you've got the specific date, but we do know that early last year, or even late, let me get my years right, yeah, late 2022, we started hearing rumors that Microsoft was going to acquire Activision. It was a $70 billion deal. And when this first popped up, everybody, the regulators, the competitors of the world kind of said, hold on a minute, let's pull the reins back. Let's take a look at this because without belaboring the point, we know what title Activision has, Call of Duty, for all platforms. PlayStation being the Xbox competitor. So, Sony automatically throws the red flag up in there and says, hey, we're not having any of this. We're not going to see the biggest title go to our biggest hardware competitor as well. So that started raising the flags of all the agencies out there, the FTC, the CMA. Look, we're going to start looking into this. We're going to make sure this isn't anti competitive. We're going to make sure that Microsoft does things fairly. So Microsoft was kind of put in a box of like, okay, before these regulatory agencies can take a look at this, let's go out there and make some deals. Let's make some deals. Let's show that we want to be the good sport in this merger and show that we want gamers to have full access to all titles. And even though we see Sony as a hardware competitor, we're even going to be good to Sony. So I believe the first one, surprisingly, to jump out there and sign that 10-year deal that was offered was Nintendo, if I remember correctly. We
Yeah,
had
they were. Yeah.
Nintendo came out, signed a deal, and GE Force Now signed a deal, and several others were able to sign a deal to get 10-year rights to the Call of Duty franchise. And Microsoft is saying, hey, you have access, everything's going to be okay. Then Sony says no. Long story short, the FTC takes Microsoft to court and does not do a very good job of putting up the fight to show that Microsoft is quote unquote being a bad boy. Microsoft walks away from that with a victory in hand, which basically pushed the merger into conclusion. Now, I know all their court battles are not over with yet, but ironically, what really caught my attention was when Sony saw where things were, they too accepted a 10-year deal, if I remember correctly, to keep Call of Duty and other titles on their platform. So I'll let you fill in some of the dates and we'll go from there.
Yeah, starting January 18, 2022, Microsoft announced its intention to buy Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion in the largest video game deal out there. This is by far probably just one of the biggest mergers in general for any set
Mm-hmm.
company or business. April 1st, about was it 4 months later, U.S. senators, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, started raising concerns, like you mentioned, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this is a very big deal. Normally, we don't bother ourselves with gaming stuff, but for the amount that's going on, we might need to look into this." July 6, 2022, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, which you'll hear that acronym several times, decides that it wants to launch an investigation as well, saying, hey, the US, you aren't the only ones looking into this. This has repercussions for us over here across the pond. September 1st, 2022, the CMA actually says the deal could harm competition. They kind of pitch out a letter saying this. Now, again, they're still investigating. They haven't said no to it. They're just saying that this could be an issue. Uh, December 8th, 2022, the Biden administration moves to block the deal, saying it would reduce innovation and choice for gamers. This is the first of the three big regulatory bodies to say no. And this, again, when they say Biden administration, they mean the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, the UK's CMA is the other one, and the EU Commission is the third, the big tent poles. The rest, Microsoft, along this process since April, has been gathering smaller ones like the country of Brazil or Japan, the Middle East. These are other people who have already started signing on, saying, "Yeah, this is cool with us." But the FTC was again one of the big ones they need to get out of the way. And in December that same year they announced, they were saying no, which is a big issue. Following that, February 8th, 2023, the UK blocks the deal. Now, mind you, the FTC said they want to block the deal. They hadn't actually blocked it yet. To this day, they still haven't blocked it yet. But the UK actually does block the deal, and this puts a what is it, a wrench in the gears, whatever, stopping the whole process. Because if they
Wrench
can't
in
get,
the oil.
there we go. If they can't get the CMA to approve it, this deal is pretty much dead because they need the CMA, they need the FTC, and they need the UK because those are some of the biggest markets that the Xbox plays in. Uh, and again, they are also on a deadline at this point. I don't think we mentioned this, but they had basically told Activision Blizzard that we can get this done in a year, and if we don't, we'll owe you guys, I think it was $4 billion as a non-acquisition penalty. So they would walk away from the deal, losing out on all the publishing rights, plus minus $4 billion, and Activision be able to go about their business. So they're under the clock, and with the UK saying no in February, it looked like they're about to owe that $4 billion because they had to have the deal done by July 31st or something like that of 2023. March 1st of 2023, Microsoft strikes the 10-year deal, starts handing them out to everybody, hands them out to NVIDIA, hands it out to Nintendo, hands it out to a bunch of European cloud gaming services as well, saying, hey, to show you that this is in good faith, everyone gets a 10-year deal on Call of Duty specifically, because that is that's what everyone saw as the big issue here, is that, we can't have Microsoft exclusively locking down Call of Duty just to Xbox. Not that they would, but, that was the fear. In April 26, 2023, the EU approves it. This is the first sign of like real life that they got back saying like, okay, this could go through. Again, FTC hasn't officially done it, but they said they would like to. The CMA has blocked it, so they're not doing very well. With the EU saying yes, they have the win behind them. Things, the life is breathed back into this deal. May 15th, 2023, Microsoft wins an appeal against the UK saying, hey, we'd like you to revisit that no that you said, because we don't think you did it under the proper circumstances. And the CTA, I believe, which is the Competition Tribunal appeal process or authority or whatever, they are notorious to side with the CMA. So this it still looked like a lost effort on Microsoft's part, but they did it anyway. June 12th, 2023, the US FTC asked the courts to block the deal in an injunction. So they're saying, hey, we have our court date, which I believe was later in the year. It was maybe August or something like that. But in the meantime, if the UK decides to change their mind and the the EU grants them this, Microsoft could go ahead and just say, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to push the deal through. We'll do it with the FTC later. They went to the court saying, don't allow Microsoft to do that. We can't say no officially just yet, but don't even allow them to close the deal if the CMA changes their mind. July 12th, 2023, the UK CMA says that a restructured deal could satisfy its concerns. So again, the FTC is under the clock now saying, hey, if the CMA can just hold off and keep saying no until we get our choice, the two of us standing together in opposition to this could shut this entire thing down, even if the EU is behind it. But the CMA is now saying, if you give us some concessions and, say the right things that we want to hear, we might turn our no to a maybe to a yes. Who knows? In July 19th, 2023, the FTC withdraws its case because they fumbled that horribly. The world's written about it. I advise you guys to go revisit that. The FTC basically just took talking points from Sony and presented them without actually doing any due diligence. It seems like without doing any due diligence on its own to understand what the threat is. Sony was zeroed in on Call of Duty because it makes a lot of money on that. But the CMA's reason why they originally said no was because they feared Microsoft's future investments and endeavors, which had to do with the cloud and mobile. The FTC was focused primarily on Call of Duty, and when you hear the arguments out, they didn't have any. So the judge in the FTC's case said your injunction is not granted. Microsoft can move ahead. The only thing holding back was the appeal from the CMA. We moved down to September 22nd, or apologies, August 22nd. The CMA seeks a public input and kind of figure out how they can restructure the deal. They get some ideas, they get some notes, they give it to Microsoft. Microsoft mulls over it. September 22nd, 2023, the CMA approves the restructured deals. Microsoft basically said, all right, if everyone's afraid of Call of Duty, how about we take that out of the equation? We will give it to Ubisoft as an arbiter. Ubisoft will control Call of Duty and for the next 15 years, and they will license it out to everyone, including us ourselves. So Microsoft has to pay Ubisoft in order to have any kind of rights over to Call of Duty, as does Sony, as does Nintendo, as does everyone else. So that they feel like this is the only way being fair going forward. So again, this is for 15 years. After 15 years, I think Microsoft retains those rights and they can start to do whatever kind of weird exclusivity stuff they might want to do. October 13th, 2023, Microsoft completes its acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Again, the FTC still has, their objections on the board, but the deal's pretty much done in October of this year. So we are now starting to see some kind of trickling out of, ideas that they want to do with this. And we've had some interviews about where they'd like to move forward, but the deal is done. Microsoft gets it. So it took a little longer than they wanted it to, but they were able to do it. And here we are now with Microsoft owning one of the largest titles, a set of titles for publisher and slash game provider out there. I think that's pretty good, right?
That was good. Now take a minute, catch your breath there, get you a little sip of water.
Thank
Uh,
you.
you will. Uh, I think that I'm not going to rehash what you just said there, but I think this will be the year that we everybody wanted it before Christmas, but I think us tech enthusiasts knew that it was not possible. I think we're going to start to see some of the titles, Activision Blizzard, the Diablos, the Call of Duties, maybe not the new Call of Duties, maybe the older Call of Duties are possibly going to come to Game Pass. We're already seeing a few things pop up on GE Force now. That they have wasted zero time getting things up in the GE Force Now cloud. So it's a good year to be a gamer for many reasons, not just the fact that this merger is taking place. Cloud gaming is getting better. We've got Starfield out there that is still doing well, that is supposed to have some updates the first quarter of the year. We've got Diablo is always out there. Let's see, what else is going to come out there that I can throw out there. We got the Grand Theft Autos that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So for the Sony fans, you don't have anything to worry about, I don't think. I think Microsoft, with what you said, is going to play fairly with them, with Ubisoft basically controlling how the licensing is done. And I'm glad to see this over. I think we've got some other things to talk about this year that are going to take the place of the Activision Blizzard merger. And I'll leave it there. I think we can go. This is one of those topics that if you go back to what we wrote last year and some of the older podcasts we did, we have already talked to death. So I encourage people to go check some of that stuff out and just wait for your favorite titles to start popping up on Xbox. I think that's kind of where we're at with it.
Yeah, we have a prediction section where we'll talk about where we think this particular acquisition winds up in 2024 and all of the pluses and a couple minuses. But we're going to get into the next topic, which was, again, this started at the beginning of the year. This is in the first quarter. This was the slowdown, the post pandemic business slowdown at Microsoft. They went through, I think, what many people did, which was a massive, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, for keeping it blunt, firing of how many was it? 40,000 employees.
Mm-hmm. You're close there.
And they had to do this. I think they announced the layoffs starting like the first week of January, and it was supposed to run until uh, March of some sort, I believe, the end of March, beginning of April. So they had about 4 months to get rid of 40,000 employees. And it was start times. This is when a lot of companies, Microsoft was not exclusive in this. I believe Google had, they let off, I think it was 10,000, maybe more than that. I failed to remember the exact number of theirs, but they let off multiple thousands of people. Sony was in the same boat. Salesforce was another amongst these lots of companies, and this was all in the fear, I believe, of a recession. We had inflation at an all-time high going into 2023. A lot of analysts, experts were predicting a recession, so a lot of these companies were laying off people in preparation for that. And I say this with all the solace I can give this topic because it's unfortunate when anybody loses a job, especially if it's the lifeblood. We saw a lot of friends of ours who
Yep.
were lifelong employees of Microsoft get laid off. So Ben Rudolph had been there for a long time. I think he started his own company now, and he seems to be doing well. But we didn't expect to see that happen. It's just a lot of departments were gone, and in the wake of that, we had a lot of the businesses slowing down. This is when we started to hear about Microsoft shuttering a lot of projects for stuff like HoloLens. Went down to a skeleton crew. I mean, it wasn't doing great to begin with. It was already on life support, and it seemed like Microsoft was kind of playing with the light switch on that one. They got rid of, I think, Alex Kipman, who was embroiled in a bit of controversy. But again, they basically shifted from there ever being a potential HoloLens 3 to saying, all right, we're going to focus on our military objectives with HoloLens right now. And if there happens to be a path forward in the future, we may revisit that. But right now, we're not doing that. And most of the HoloLens teams let go, unfortunately. Like I had mentioned, the Surface department saw a lot of its projects shuttered. There was, people, we were in talks of a Surface Duo 3 that was being hyped up. Things like that were taken off the board. They slimmed down the product lines of things they're going to invest in and potentially look after. So we're going to see we lost headphones, we lost earbuds, we lost, like I said, we lost the phone. I think they stuck with the hub. We're going to lose the studio as the all-in-one as well. They're going to refocus their efforts on the laptop studio being your kind of main thing, and maybe use a dock to plug it in or whatnot. Uh, there were other, I think LinkedIn had a bunch of layoffs as well.
They did.
GitHub had layoffs as well. So this was kind of interesting to see. Like I said, Microsoft tends to do their layoffs in the summer, but they came out, and they did do layoffs in the summer in addition to this. But this was the big 40,000 number that everyone had written about in headlines. To be fair, Microsoft also employed 140,000 employees or something like that going into the year. They had, like, doubled their recruitment numbers in the previous years while they had everyone working from home. So this is kind of going back to their normal numbers. They usually hover around between 100,000 and 120,000 employees in any given year. They also having issues with the new campus that they built. They had spent a ton of money, a ton of time, a ton of resources building this new campus that they were going to have everyone kind of come back to after the pandemic. Now they're having to lease out some of those buildings or whatnot because they employees one didn't want to come back, and they realized the productivity and the numbers were fine, if not better, than before. So it's kind of weird to see a company do this huge investment just to have something like a freak of nature incident happen, and kind of watch how they scramble to kind of save that.
It's amazing to me how, not, as you said, not just for Microsoft, how the pandemic happened and that changed how we work. I mean, you didn't see stuff like we're doing here every day, online, people meeting, people exchanging documents, people relying on the information infrastructure, the internet, connectivity, cell phones, cell towers, networking. List goes on. We had that happen. We see the shift from working in the office to work from home. Then when the pandemic ends, we see it go back to what we call a hybrid office or hybrid working, maybe where you do 3 days a week at home, 2 days a week in the office, or some combination thereof. And then we have this thing, with inflation and the layoffs. And I think all companies have had to step back and take a look and say, okay, in this new work environment, what do we really need? And unfortunately, when you do that, there's a surplus and somebody ends up on the bottom end or the negative side of what's going to happen. And I think that's what you've seen happen because while Microsoft laid off 40,000 people, they've also hired some back. I have seen reports where they've hired some back. Um, they do have a small campus here in North Carolina. I've even seen where some have been hired back there as well. And some of these other companies are retooling things and are getting people in different places and giving people different roles. And I think this is just where we're going to stay. I think we're going to stay in this hybrid type of environment because for every desk you put in an office, there is a cost. Not so much the desk itself and the things you put on that desk, because you may still be supplying your employees with laptops, cell phones, etc., to work from home, but there's office space, there's square footage, there's heating and cooling, there's parking, there's, you know, internet access, there's everything required to make that building function that I think these companies are taking a look at. I think this hybrid way of doing things is where we're going to be, and I think that's where we're going to stay at least for this generation.
Yeah, which is interesting because you'd have thought something like the Hollands would have survived this and flourished in this, but it
Yes,
seems like, in addition to Microsoft's mishandling, which I say is about 90% of this, the pandemic also kind of accelerated what we eventually have, which is the shuttering, I believe, too. It's not mentioned in our dropdown, but Windows mixed reality is no longer a thing.
right. They
So
just
that
announced just
that's
a couple of weeks ago it's gone.
yeah. So that's going forward, there will not be Windows mixed reality in future operating systems. Not a thing, and they're going to shutter what's currently available. So again, it seems like the pandemic kind of accelerated the decline that, or at least the care that when Microsoft was showing HoloLens to begin with. So that's unfortunate. But on the plus side, what we did get out of this year, at the beginning of this year, was an acceleration in AI. We have lots of AI. Microsoft was championing that very much so.
We went from not knowing what this thing AI was to look where we are now. I mean, we're like you said, we're January 5th, so we're about a year later from when Microsoft just said, "Hey, look at this thing called AI," and we're already to the point of it started in Bing, just a simple type of question, get an answer. Everybody thought that was cool. There was questions of how's this any different than your digital assistant on your phone. I asked that question many times. Then within a matter of weeks, I'm not even going to say months, we're seeing AI start to solve problems, technical problems, personal issues. We're seeing how AI can collaborate with your data later down the line. By July, August of last year, we changed the name from AI to, or the new Bing, to something called Copilot. Microsoft wants to build that into everything. And we're going to get into that a little deeper in just a second. They want to put it in your office. They want to put it on your PC. They want to put it in your browser. They want it on your phone to where you ask questions, queries, you get answers. Programmers, developers, it will draw images for you. And companies have just, not just Microsoft, Adobe is knee deep into this stuff. Our little developers out there are leveraging these language libraries and throwing AI into their products. Some of our website tools that we use for building our articles every day now have options for, do you need help with this? Do you want us to generate this? We went this time last year. If you would have told me that we would have this thing called Copilot now, I would say, what are you talking about? Now there's some negativity with Microsoft giving $10 billion to a company called OpenAI and buying in to make all this happen. It's not been a smooth ride, but I think this is, even though we've not necessarily jumped all the way into predictions, I think this is the year where the way we consume information, the way we handle, organize, and deal with our information changes. It's not going to be just a text based search box anymore.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it was, to your point, we had been writing about OpenAI towards the end of 2022, and it was
Hmm.
little headlines, and the biggest headline that showed up was the $10 billion investment in this company. We thought at this point, I think they were using it to this, pre-generative model to power coding. That was the big thing, and I felt like at the time I was writing it, that's where it was going to live. Like coders
I did
were
too.
going to be able to go into GitHub, ask for specific things like, "Hey, write me a script for some type of I don't know. I guess what do you say? What they called non-playable character dialogue,
Yeah.
for a set number of players in a game or whatever. I need it for the next Grand Theft Auto. I need a whole dialogue box. I need a whole dialogue set for these non-playable characters in this region. Write me up that. And it was supposed to be able to do that within minutes, maybe half an hour or so. And you didn't have to do that anymore yourself. You didn't have to sit down and write all those lines of code. You'd be able to pull code from various open source resources and have that created and spit it out for you. That's where I thought this was going to live. Fast forward to 2 months after that, or 3 months after that, Microsoft saying, "Hey, we're going to throw it into something called, Bing, or we're going to create something called Bing Chat, where you basically go in and you start asking questions like, I need a recipe for, family of four that uses fried chicken and green beans. Can you give me that?" And it gives you all kinds of options, and prep time and, calorie count and stuff like that. That's where they pitched it first. And it took off because, they gave it limited access to a bunch of people who were on the internet. That's always rule number one. Don't do that. But they did. And people had fun with it. They started, you know, I think some of the early stories, one of the biggest ones was who was the publication whose journalist found out that when chatting with Bing Chat enough, it told him to like leave his wife and run off with Bing Chat or
Who
whatever. I
was
forget.
that? I
I
remember.
forget. It was like CNET or something like that. One of the journalists over there was playing around with it because of the way that you could keep prompting further conversations from it. Microsoft didn't really put any regulations or stipulations on this thing. It just said, "Hey, have at it." After these stories started coming out and they started seeing perhaps the dark side of what could happen, they finally started saying, "Hey, we need to kind of put the brakes on this thing." But it was fun, and it gave it enough of a cultural reference that it was, start becoming, the butt of jokes and late night talk shows. Jimmy Kimmel was talking about it enough to where Bing was now being talked about once again in a much broader light. Again, might not necessarily been the positive one, hence the rebranding to Copilot, not Bing Chat anymore, but it was enough to at least start the conversation about AI, Microsoft, and Bing to a certain extent. And then other companies, followed suit. Google quickly answered back when they scrambled to create Bard. And if you guys need any context for this, those of you listening, Google started off with GPT. They were amongst probably the first companies to play around with it because of its inherent ability to circumvent search. So to a certain extent, you're no longer looking at links or clicks. The advertising mechanism behind what Google works on for search, you type in a search query and a bunch of people bid to be put in front of you. And that's where Google makes its bread and butter. The way that this new chatbot works is that it just gives you the information. It sources it from actual copy and text from these locations. It spits it out to you saying, "Hey, here's what you want." You no longer need to go to these destinations. So these people who are paying to be put in front of you to have you go to their website, sign up for a newsletter, make a purchase, whatever the transaction is on that other end, that no longer needs to happen. That is a big downfall for Google. And Google sat on this for, I want to say, about 6 years before Microsoft got into it and said, "Hey, we don't. This isn't a business we want to get into." So they didn't do anything with it. Microsoft, who does have a search business, isn't doing very well, and said, "To hell with it. What do we have to lose? We're not winning anything right now. Let's put it out there." And in response to seeing, everyone kind of rush towards this and get the headlines, Google said, all right, we need a solution for this. We can't just let Microsoft run free with this because if they're successful, not only does it cut into our search, but it then puts them in the number one driving seat for this new type of search. We need to be controlling that. We need to figure out a way to backport this in a way we can make money. So they came up with Bard. At the time when Bard was first announced, it was pitiful. Not that Copilot Bing Chat was any better, but it was at least more widely used. And since January, since a bunch of different events and features have been put into both these things, they're starting to kind of find their legs and stuff. But January through April was all Microsoft. All people were talking about was Bing Chat, for better or for worse. So that was our first thing. We're gonna move on to our next one, which kind of goes into the evolution of Bing Chat, which is Microsoft 365 Copilot. Do you want to tell people how that evolved?
Well, it evolved from the OpenAI investment, like you mentioned there, and then Microsoft decided, hey, we can put this in our Office product and use it to pull your information together, give you summaries of meetings, give you summaries of Teams conversations, look up things in your company data, and Microsoft said, hey, it's a little bit more than Bing, so let's call it Copilot. And now Copilot became an icon that was on, and then I'm talking in terms of the average everyday consumer. Copilot became an icon that was on your taskbar if you were in the Windows Insider program about midway through last year, and it has now moved into production. It should be on, I'll say, most PCs at this point. And when you click the Copilot button, essentially you get what is a glorified browser window that you can now ask Copilot questions and get answers. So Microsoft said, hey, there's a way to make money off of this because what a lot of consumers don't realize is to come up with these answers for these questions requires, I believe it was 100 times more computing power than a regular search result that you may type into Bing or Google to get your answers to your questions. We've got GPUs being used and money being spent. So we had a Copilot for Microsoft 365, which I believe is $30 per user, to where companies can leverage that to use it for company data, going through company data, summarizing meetings, summarizing emails, generating content for people inside the office. And it is available now. So we'll just have to wait and see where Copilot goes. We do know that Windows 12 is coming. We do know that there's some hardware out there that is going to try to help move some of these language models to better and quicker access inside of operating systems. Now, that's kind of where all of these AI language models are struggling. How quick can they give you responses? How quick can they generate the more complex responses? And how accurate are they? So, there's still some work to do, but Bill Gates said something a few weeks ago, and I'm going to paraphrase that AI is now what the same leap in technology and information that the search engine was 15, 20 years ago. So
Yeah,
I personally agree with that.
I agree with it to a certain extent. We need to see the user behavior follow suit. Because right now, search is a commodity. Everyone knows how to do it. They know how,
Hmm.
you see a box, you type into it, and like I said, you get links, and you go visit those links, and you get the information you need, or you make the engagement that you need to, and you're out. The way that these Copilot, Bard, all of these pre-generative models work, at least in the chat function capability, kind of circumvents some of that. You no longer need to do another action after you search. All that information is put before you. And so now you need to figure out, just how to prompt and ingest this information going forward. Your expectations need to shift a little bit. People need to learn that they can do more than just type in, you know, uh, prefix questions. We used to, at the end of, I think Google was one amongst the first to get rid of the question mark at the end of a search, because we always had to prompt it as, okay, how do I do this? And with the question mark, so you can get the specific thing. You try to keep your questions short because you don't want to trip up the search engine. If you start getting too broad, it doesn't find what you need. With these new models, you can get as very specific as you can to get a very specific answer. And that's what people need to start understanding. Because right now, people are still trying to do their old search on these new things, and they're not getting quite the results that they thought they would get. They're getting a bunch of, you and I talked about this off mic, extra stuff that they don't need necessarily, because they were looking for something specific because they typed in something specific, but not the specific way that these models understand the way to output this stuff. So I said all this to say that there's still a learning process before we can say that this can replace search or become the new thing that we do with the internet. But I do agree with both of you saying, like, hey, this has the potential to be, uh, user behavior shift for a lot of things. Uh, I'm going to move on to something that was a little bit under the radar, even for our own reporting. But for those of you who are in business, this was still a big thing because Microsoft figured out a way to basically combine everything and make it, this is what they, for better or for worse, this is what they're good at. This is what, they get in trouble with sometimes, consolidating and bundling, so to speak, or making things, single stack when, maybe people want more options. But Microsoft Fabric. During Build 2023, Microsoft unveiled Fabric, and it's an Indian unified analytics software as a service platform that brings together data factories, Synapse, and Power BI. So those of you who use large model data sources and need visualizations in order to present them in reports, or just make it easier to ingest all that data, Microsoft's made it easy. Now you can find something called, make use of Microsoft Fabric, which is again their large, I guess Satya Nadella said it at Build, which is the biggest launch of a data product for Microsoft since the launch of SQL Server, SQL Server. So, quote, it's most interestingly, it unifies the business models across all the different types of analytics workloads, whether they're SQL, machine learning, or whatever job you want. You can use the same compute infrastructure, and as I said during the event, and this unification at the end of the day is what I think will fuel the next generation of AI applications. So this is feeding back into this AI talk that we've been discussing for the last year and a half or a year or so. With Fabric, users don't need to work with multiple vendors to get a complete analytics platform. This is where the anti-competitive part comes in. According to Microsoft, once Pilot is available for Fabric, users can leverage conversational language for data flows, data pipelines, code generation, machine learning models, and visualization. So Microsoft's going to tack on Copilot, which again, this is pre-generative model we're talking about, and where they see their advantage over something like Bard, which is more conversational. They're using the business aspect of this to basically, if you need to say, hey, I need a visual mapping of our best performing uh, locations throughout the state, and I want it color coded based on P&Ls and revenues and profits, and I need it over the past 3 years broken into quarters. You can type that all in, or say it if you want to use the voice portion of it, and this Fabric software or this platform will start to pull from Synapse and use Power BI to display it, and use uh, the engineering and data factories to coalesce all of this and spit out something for you. So where you used to have to go in and use one thing to build uh, uh, the visualization, another thing to grab all the data, another thing to host it in the cloud and pull from there. You don't longer need to do that. You just type in a few things, and presentation will be brought before you, and you can tweak it to your heart's content. You can keep asking it for finer and finer prompts in order to get specifically what you need, but that's big. In an effort to eliminate data silos, Microsoft Fabric has OneDrive like multi cloud data lake called OneLake that is automatically available to every tenant with all workloads wired into OneLake as well as Microsoft 365 apps. So, again, if you have your data stored in a different uh, cloud drive, cloud service, if it's Microsoft supports it through Microsoft 365, which they do, they support over 100 different cloud vendors or whatnot. More than likely, they will support you. Or if you are a big enough company, I'm sure they will bend over backwards to create that support for you. Uh, you can just start pulling all that data, years, decades worth of information, in order to optimize or prioritize certain things into this Microsoft Fabric. Have it spit out something for you. This is the promise of AI, I think, for Microsoft.
And I think that's the easy way to handle AI, and I think that's the way I want to say it because, like you said, it's the Microsoft Fabric that's tying in all of the AI options together. Because if you are somewhat techy and you've been paying attention, a lot of these small companies are like XYZ product now with AI, and I'm not referring to Microsoft products necessarily here. And everybody's got their own little language model that does what they want it to do that suits their product. And I think Microsoft has got so many things in AI. They've got the GitHub, the Copilot, the Dynamics 365, you know, this stuff for developers that you and I might not totally understand. Where and these companies have got data. Well, we use the Amazon cloud, but we would love to you know use some of these Copilot features. So Microsoft says, okay, here's a connector to go connect your data in the Amazon cloud and use these AI functions on it. So I think you're going to see more of this. I don't think you're going to see everybody have a language model version of that language model, but I think you're going to start seeing connections between data to get these language models to do what these companies want them to do. Now, does it lead to some arguments and some competitive issues? I think that's very possible.
Speaking of competitive issues, this is the other big news thing, and again, it pales in comparison to the two major ones, which was Activision Blizzard and AI. But going forward, this could be a big thing. This is Microsoft and Google back on the fighting stage, back in the ring again,
Ding
but for a
ding.
next, yeah, but for a next generation product. We've seen them fight over mobile. Microsoft lost that battle. We see them fight over search. Microsoft lost that battle. We see them fight over browsers. Microsoft lost that battle. But Microsoft could be one of four if they can win this cloud one, and they're trying to. But Google is very quick, and so are a lot of other smaller companies in the UK, especially in the EU, are voicing concerns over Microsoft's ability to leverage its Azure cloud and its pricing and the way that they do things to create a more competitive uh, platform advantage. Bundling stuff like Teams, the way that they are, at least as far as Google's concerned, uh, kneecapping the pricing or support for other cloud vendors. They're saying like, hey, if you have Azure and you're running these particular things, you will save this amount of money, which to on the surface of it seems like the most competitive capitalistic way to think about this, the free enterprise market. But because they own this stack of software plus cloud, it gives Google and Salesforce and these other competitors who already have companies who already have uh, customers a disadvantage. And so now I believe the CMA, which we mentioned earlier, which are no fans of Microsoft, are investigating their bundling. The FTC's investigating their bundling. Uh, I think the hyperscale continues to be a debate between the two companies. Google reportedly told the FTC in a letter that Microsoft is limiting choice, increasing costs for customers, which is disrupting the digital ecosystem as we know it right now. Google reportedly said Microsoft control with its license and customer lock-in tactics present a national security risk. Specifically, Google highlighted cyber attacks that involve Microsoft products, such as the massive SolarWinds breach 3 years ago. So it sounds like Google's argument is if we allow Microsoft to be the biggest and only competitor in this market by leveraging their advantages to a certain extent, when something bad does happen, it's a big security risk for everybody because you don't have an alternative to run to, you don't have an alternative to use, you don't even have the certain breaking points in just having a diversified portfolio of software. So if Microsoft Azure is attacked, but you're using Google's I don't know Office suite, there's that natural breaking point where Azure cuts off, and you don't get the attack into the Google productivity suite or their chat options or whatever. But if you're using all Microsoft, once one thing is broken, all that information is up for grabs potentially. So that's their argument. What do you think?
I think there's a valid argument there. This whole cloud thing is going to get ugly, ugly. I'm afraid because there's Google's got their stake in the pie, Microsoft has got their stake in the pie, and everybody wants that bigger slice. Everybody wants the biggest slice of that pie, and they're going to throw pie at each other while we're staying on the pie reference. They're going to throw
I
pie
like
at
it.
each other. And eventually the judge is going to come in there and he's going to put his little pie knife down and say, no more.
There we go.
I mean,
I like it.
it's going to have to work out that way. Very similar to the way some of the arguments that Microsoft gets itself in with other companies in the past. I know I wrote a story, I guess it was middle of last year, about how Microsoft was capping the cost of services based on where you were located and, what type of other relationships you had with Microsoft. I think that's a part of the problem because Google is sitting here saying, "Hey, we're allowing Microsoft to bundle everything together." There's talk and argument that Teams should be unbundled from 365 to allow them, to force Microsoft to sell that separately to give companies an option to enter into other agreements, say for their collaboration tools. For example, take us for example. We use Office 365 and we've got our chat, our file storage, our emails, and our article planners, everything we need right there in one purchase. So, what gives us any reason to even go look at Google's workspace for business offer? And that's what has upset Google. Microsoft has took control of the entire ecosystem, and they're saying, "Okay, we need to break that apart. Everybody gets a toy at Christmas. We want our toy too."
Yeah, I mean that's what they're gonna have to do going forward. Again, they managed to turn the legendary no combination of the CTA and the CMA
Hmm.
to a yes for just the gaming portion of their business, which again, it's $68.7 billion on the line. But this is the core of Microsoft. AI, cloud, enterprise. They're going to figure out a way to appease everyone, uh, even to the detriment of their own wants and ambitions. So I don't fear that this is going to be them stepping back in the cloud wars or even falling behind because they are markedly ahead of Google, and any concessions they make obviously will lean towards saving that position. But they will make them, and I think it'll be for the betterment of everybody when they do. We'll just have to see how long it takes them to drag their feet and how long they can kind of whine and complain about doing so before they actually do so. But we are an hour in. I think it's time that we start moving towards our predictions. What do you think?
I think so. I think we have lived in the 2023 past for long enough. So let's jump on into 2024. I think 2024 is going to be a big year for technology and computing. So let's kind of just jump in. We're going to see the huge Activision Game Pass drop. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to see the Activision titles finally make their way to Game Pass. We've got the new Surface products that should be coming out that we did not get at the end of last year. But here's the catch: they're going to have an NPU supposedly in the new Surface Pro. We'll call it for now the Surface Pro 10. I'm sure it will be called the Surface Pro 10 with AI or something. But supposedly, we're going to start seeing these NPUs in PCs to make the AI computations be done more on device, maybe, or maybe we're going to start storing small portions of the language models on devices to make things go quicker. We're already seeing, you know, ARM a deeper push, I should say, into ARM CPUs with Snapdragon and Dell and HP saying, "Hey, we're going to come out with these. We're going to have more efficient PCs next year." So I know I'm glossing over a few things because we really don't know all of what we're going to have, and we're going to learn some of that just next week when we come back to you with the CES podcast. by this time next week, we'll have a better picture of what we're going to see in 2024 and where we're going to go and how far 2024 is going to take us. There's going to be some roads down in there that we haven't thought of. There's going to be a concept product that takes off. There's going to be a concept product that everybody wants that never hits the shelves. But, this is where it's at. We've got handheld gaming consoles, that we never thought we'd see that have come out in the last year. The ROG Ally, there's one by MSI supposedly coming that is based off of an Intel CPU with the Intel Arc graphics chip that I'm interested in seeing. I think it's going to be, a big, big year. Probably one of the biggest overall years technology has seen in a while.
Yeah, I think we were fortunate to get right before Christmas. I want to say, is it right before Christmas? Yeah, it was right before Christmas. Or it might have been right after. Actually, I think it was like the last 2 days of the year. So like, and our friend, uh, and colleague Zach Bowden over at Windows Central got a report of what we should expect for Surface, and it's going to be a big year apparently. Uh,
Hmm.
current year was kind of a slow one by all accounts and all measures. We had two devices. One was a Surface. Well, they're both Surface, but one was more of the desired Surface update, which was the Surface Laptop Studio 2. And then we got the Surface Laptop Go 3, which was kind of a head scratcher for what it did and what it was at the
No
time.
backlight on the keyboard.
Yes, you were very upset about that. Yeah, so and then we got nothing else. We didn't hear anything about the Pro. We didn't hear anything about the laptop. We didn't hear any, and as we mentioned at the top of this pod, that we're having issues with them coming up with just keeping the line of devices afloat. We lost a bunch of stuff, so it was kind of a damper, dour presentation. They talked a lot about AI at a hardware event, which again had everyone kind of having their head scratched. But with that being said, what we do know is that they will be updating the Surface Pro. We will get the Surface Pro 10 and the Surface Laptop 6, I believe. And both of them will be coming with ARM processors for the first time. I know that the Surface Pro X had an ARM processor, and it was this, souped up version of a Qualcomm processor, but it was still, well below what it needed to be in order to run Windows. There was both the processor issue and Microsoft's translation layer that were the biggest crutches when it first came out. They've worked on it since then, the transition layer at least, for the Surface Pro X follow up that I think it was the Surface Pro X2 or whatever they called it, which was better, but the chipsets were still mobile processors that weren't able to kind of uh, run the x86 apps or whatever that they needed to, at least not the way that they needed to. Now that Microsoft's kind of fixed some of those issues, this new chipset, which is I think called CAMDUS, which is CADMUS, is what they're calling it, but it's basically Qualcomm's X Elite X chip or whatnot, which is supposed to be able to run circles around Intel and keep up with the M2 processors that the Macs have. They specifically narrowed in on the M2 because the M3s just came out. But there's been some reporting through some of the benchmarks, again, benchmarks, not real life usage, that they can keep up with the M3s as well to a certain extent. So we'll be getting ARM processors in both the Surface Laptop 6 and the Surface Pro 10. I don't think they're going to need to make, they stopped making the X lineup and just called it the Surface Pro 9. Now they're going to get even further into this. And I believe with those chipsets, we're also going to get a chassis to redesign because the ARM processors won't necessarily need fans like the Intel versions do. The Intel versions, both will Intel and ARM will come with the MPUs, as you said, which will help power some of this potential Windows 12 stuff we're going to talk about in the next section. But at least as far as we can tell, at least what Microsoft wanted to do with it initially was uh, Windows Studio Effects, which were these camera and audio things within Windows that are embedded in them. Kind of think the kind of same software platform stuff you get with NVIDIA's broadcast are now becoming just ubiquitous across all Windows devices. You don't need to necessarily have an NVIDIA chip in order to run these things. You'll just, if you have an Intel or an ARM version of these, you'll be able to use these blurring effects, audio isolation, uh, uh, think background noise, and all these other things are built into the software. These will just become standard for everyone to use on even the minimum spec. Now, again, the specs are going to go up because you need to have what's needed to power these. But on a baseline, if you go into a Best Buy, presumably after CES, whenever they start to roll out, beginning of late spring, early summer, and you say you buy a $500 ARM based PC, you'll be able to have the blurring effects, bokeh effects for video conferencing right out of the bat. You won't need to necessarily go out and buy a new webcam or scour Amazon for $40, $50 attachment. So these are the kind of AI things they're going to start with early on. Uh, but they also want to have on-device stuff. We always hear Apple talk about on-device. So on-device Copilot, meaning that if you're offline, if you're without bandwidth, you'll be able to still use some of these pre-generative digital assistant features. And I think Microsoft had kind of showed off, and we'll talk about this again in the Windows 12 section, what the localized version of this is. So rather than it just being a glorified search app on your desktop, these are things that you can command through your search on your device, saying like, "Hey, pull up my file that I wrote." If you're a writer or something, pull up the doc that I wrote 3 years ago on the Windows 10, and it's failure to do whatever, yada yada yada. It'll be able to pull that file up and then suggest other apps to go alongside it. Like, hey, do you want to make a PowerPoint presentation of this? Do you want to pair it with, or would you like me to pull up two other the reference docs that you had? Would you like me to pull from your bookmarks that all the sections that you used in order to write this, all the references and things like that. It'll be able to start pulling that kind of stuff. And, that's just the beefed up version of this. Uh, Beyond all of those things, we're getting hardware redesigns, which I think is the biggest things, the most immediate things we can write about that catch everyone's attention. They're going to finally update the chassis for the Surface Pro 6 or Surface Laptop 6, which is supposed to have thinner bezels, a rounded display. I think right now they're cornered off. If you need a reference for what the rounded display looks like, go look at any Surface Laptop Studio review online or pictures anywhere. That's the rounded display that we're talking about. They're going to bring back ports, which is also big. So hopefully they'll bring back a full HDMI somewhere rather than just tacking on just the USB-A, which I think they did for the Surface Laptop Studio. They also did bring an SD card, so maybe we'll get the SD card back. Maybe more Thunderbolts, who knows? I don't know if they're going to keep the wedge design. They may move to just a thinner version of the Surface Laptop Studio, which is what I predicted. I think 2 years ago, whatever. I think that's where they should go, just unify the look of everything. The Surface Pro is going to get a redesign as well. Again, I'm presuming a much thinner chassis for the ARM devices, more akin to maybe the iPad or Samsung Galaxy Book series or whatnot. Uh, we also know that they're going to be adding a key, a Copilot key. So that may be added to the keyboards. Who knows if they'll bring the haptic trackpads to the Surface laptop or somehow bringing it to the studio cover. But at least the keyboards will have a new key that you can just use to launch Copilot. We'll get into what that ramifications of those are. Uh, I think that there's some of the biggest things as far as what we can kind of predict for those two devices. They're also going to be still producing Intel versions of the older devices without any of the changes. So if you're a business company and you have certain docs, you have certain office designs that work for these older devices without any of the design changes, they're thinking about making another channel, just commercial channel, where you can buy those. So you can, maintain those. Maybe they'll upgrade the chipset on that. But as far as the design and hardware is concerned, they will still be last year's model. So that's what we know so far. And I believe they're also going to be doing a redesign or update for the Surface Laptop Studio, which just got one last year. But maybe they'll create some version of an ARM version of this, or they will thin out the chassis or fix some things with 14 gen chips in it versus the 13 I think they put in this year. So that's Surface going forward. We expect big things from them. We at least know that 3 devices will be coming out. All the 3 that are the flagship ones we consider, all the ones most consumers tend to like talk about and try and go and buy. So that's Surface for you.
They're definitely making up for what we did not get this year.
Yes, yeah. We wanted big things from Surface. We got little things from Surface, which is unfortunate.
I think the question is, the only question is when do we actually see these devices? I think when we see The what's the old audit, the old saying, you see it, you believe it. I think, we're getting to the point there where, come on, Microsoft, let us see the device, let us see what we're going to get, and then the software makers can get to work and make the best of it.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's interesting because the timing of this may be sooner than we expect. We normally expect these kind of devices to come out in the late summer, early fall ish
Yep,
time, right before they announce.
October-ish.
Yes, right before they announce new Windows operating systems. But because these things are coming with new keys, the new Copilot key, and a lot of these Copilot keys will be announced in CES next week, we could see these devices launched at the end of spring. Microsoft doesn't have a history of this, but they've done it before where they've launched the Surface laptop, I believe, in spring. So this isn't unprecedented, but we could see these new devices as early as the end of spring.
It's also going to matter what their OEMs are going to do as well.
Big time. With that being said, we have and my prediction for the Surface lineup is that it'll be fine. It'll do well. I think it'll bounce back from its post-pandemic slump where they were not doing very well. They kept seeing declines in the hardware. I think this year is not going to help that. We're going to still hear about the quarterlies where they're going to have declines, but I believe going into holiday season with these things on the shelves for 3 months, we should start to see that number tick back up. I do believe there's an interest in this. Microsoft just needs to figure out the pricing. I don't know how putting these new ARM chips in will work, but they need to figure out a way to do their pricing because I think that was the biggest issue that they had this year. They put out okayish devices. I mean, they were good for what they were, but they were also overpriced. I think that was the biggest thing for the Surface Go, Surface Laptop Go. I think you said in your reporting, your
Yes,
review that again, for what it does, it needs to be a couple $100 lower. And the same thing for the Surface Laptop Studio. It's a great device. It's an expensive device. I get it. It's competing with the MacBook Pro, but at the same pricing, it doesn't do what the MacBook Pro does. And I think if they can figure out pricing for these upcoming devices, they could have a hit on their hands. They could have solid sales going into the end of 2024.
I agree with you, and I think what they have, to bring up Apple a little bit, what they have had competition at is the design language of the devices that you're paying for. I hate to say it, but you're paying for the design, you're paying for the branding. Very much like even Apple products were, it even when they were Intel, based. Everybody was saying, well, they're marked up because you're paying for the branding, you're paying, or as Apple likes to say, you're paying for the experience. And I think that's what we've been getting from Surface, and I think they're going to have to find a way to give the experience at a price level that you can go buy a Lenovo, that you can go buy a Dell, that you can go buy an Asus, that you can go buy an Acer, because I'm not going to say people are done with nice looking laptops, but I think we're selling features at this point. We're
Well, I
selling,
mean, yeah, if the idea is AI, that's what you're selling. You're selling the features. But I think the problem is not that people are done buying a nice laptop. It's just that everyone makes a nice laptop. I mean,
yeah,
you
they do.
deride we used to deride Asus and Acer for making budget friendly devices, but even their budget friendly devices are very nice devices.
They
Same
are.
thing with phones. We've gotten to a point in phones where even your budget phone is as design wise on par with your flagships like the iPhone 15 or the next Galaxy or whatever. Even Galaxy, Samsung's having issues because their A lineup are doing very well because they look like their Galaxy lineup. They look like the S lineup as well. So people appreciate design. They have an affinity for it. Now you have to upsell with the features. And Microsoft, if the price of the Surface laptop is going to be $100 more, it needs to do software
Right.
wise $100 more.
Yeah, you've got to show the consumer at this point where that extra money is.
Agreed. And with that being said, that leads us into our Windows 2024 and Windows 12 predictions because, as we just mentioned, that is going to be the driver for a lot of these devices. I mean, devices have been made really well for the last 5 years, and unless you bought one uh, prior to the pandemic, you're probably not looking to upgrade just yet. But if Microsoft and Co can entice you to use that Copilot button, that is a hardware feature that you can only get on new devices, and that's how they make their money, new devices, even though they're razor thin margins. Uh, how does Windows in the future make you use that button in order to go buy new hardware to use that button? What do you think?
They've got to, one, give me quick results. That's first and foremost for me. Two, I've got to be able to hit that Copilot button, type in, show me a summary of my emails from Kareem for Friday, January 5th, or show me the Lenovo review response for the ThinkPad X1 Carbon that Kareem sent me. You know, and I know my queries could be a little better, folks. Yes, I'm coming up with this on the fly here, but I've got to be able to hit that button, get that response, and I've got to be able to, once I get that first response, be able to ask further questions upon my previous question. You know,
Yeah,
for me, that's important. I know you work in data every day. I deal with data every day, and I'll give you a perfect example. I work with clients where we have to monitor disk usage, we have to monitor CPU usage, we have to monitor memory usage, and we are able to spit out spreadsheets of that information. I need to be able to put one of those spreadsheets in Copilot that's got 1,500 records on it, for example. Show me the top disk usage from January 1st to February 1st, hit that button. There it is. And then I need to be able to take that information. Now show me how long those clients have been using that amount of disk and narrow that down to be able to better serve my customers as well as watch my pocketbook for buying hardware. Do I need to make this investment? What's that spreadsheet telling me? What's that data telling me? I don't want to spend 30 minutes coming up with my Excel formula to give me all that and then have to come up spend 30 more minutes to come up with another Excel formula to knock that down even further. I need Copilot to desperately do these things for me.
well, that is, I believe, the vision for Copilot in general. This is why it's baked into several different apps for several specific reasons. Because there will be a general Windows Copilot, but there also is specific Excel Copilots, Outlook Copilots, PowerPoint Copilots, things that they are given specific tasks and they know how to do that. But to your point, Windows needs to be able to pull that information, those from those different copilots into the operating system itself. I think back in March, they showcased what Copilot, like I said, could do localized, which is various functions on your device to control the device itself. So,
Yep.
things like verbally saying, turn the volume up, set a uh, focus session for me for an hour and a half with this music playlist in about 20 minutes. It'll do all that in the background while you're still typing out whatever it is or while you're gathering your reference materials. If you need focus to be able to write or to plow through Excels or macros or whatever, and you wanted to do it while you're getting all the stuff ready for it, you'll be able to either speak it into a Windows device or type it into it, and it'll start running all that stuff in the background. That is the idea. Again, that is being able to do that also without connection to the cloud, which could be a bit of a lag for some people if you're not in an area, a rural area. If you're in a rural area, or if you're in an area that doesn't have sufficient broadband in order to speed these things up, having these NPUs on device should be able to process that stuff, which leads to power efficiency. Ideally, Windows 12 will be more power efficient because they will come with these devices, which is again the upsell for why you would want a Windows 12 device. Is that these NPUs will run and they won't be draining the CPU, which won't be powering any of the heating and cooling and stuff necessary that usually tax the batteries on these devices. When Microsoft can say, hey, you can get 13 hours of battery life if you didn't do anything on the device. But now they can say you can get a solid 10 hours of battery life because the NPU is doing all the peripheral stuff in the background. It's doing all the maintenance stuff as far as optimizing your battery life, dimming the lights or the color accuracy on the screen if you have an OLED or something like that, or if it's shutting down processes that aren't running or diverting certain processes through the different threads or whatnot. It's doing all that stuff isolated from the CPU and the GPU, which are also working on other things. And this battery efficiency should start to go for these things. I think that's ideally what we'd like to see. I know some people want to see some UI changes. We have this thing up on the screen for those of you who are listening. It's making the search prominent enough for people to warrant usage. Right now, it's kind of stashed it's in your taskbar. It's an icon. It's a weird icon you could probably get rid of if you wanted to, but you don't necessarily have to touch it at all. Uh, but if you make it, as we have on our screen right now, if for those who are listening, it's the search at the top. There's a search bar prominent at the top of your desktop, perhaps one that you can't get rid of, prompting people to say, "Hey, let me figure out what this thing is, and if I want to use it or not use it." And if Microsoft can figure out a way to parse all of the different ways people search and do it effectively, it is a very powerful thing. It may eventually get rid of the start menu, which I think was their goal in Windows 8. They've kind of gone back to it in Windows 10 or whatever. But this could replace, and this is the big user behavior that we talked about as far as how people understand how search works. It no longer is this I type one specific thing in and get one specific result. It's more of a suggestion that gathers a ton of information that allows you to kind of uh, you don't even necessarily need to pick and choose between it. It's just all the stuff you need already there. So right now, when you go into the search, it kind of tries to parse between what's an app, what's a web search, what's a file. Uh, just going a step further, it becomes not only did I find what you're looking for, but here are the things that are associated with that one thing that you could all use at once. Would you like to use these things? And so that's the big hope for Windows 12, and I think that's what will take Windows Copilot off the ground in the future.
Totally agree. I have to make the comment that has been made before. Yes, we are aware that the screenshot does look like the fruity operating system. Um, I do
But it's not a
understand.
bad thing,
No, it's
Imitation is a
not.
form of flattery.
And something we were talking about off mic. If you use Apple Search, Apple Search has some of these basic tendencies. That's the word I'm going to use. There is no AI that we are aware of right now in an Apple product. But if you use the Apple search, it does have a tendency that when you ask for something to start showing you documents, to start showing you web results. And I think the search bar in Windows, to be fair, does similar things. But I think like you're saying, we've got to get to the point to where everything is brought together in front of the person using the device. And
In a meaningful and practical way too.
exactly, it's got to be practical. It's got to be organized because we've already gone. You guys have stuck with us for an hour and a half already. But I want to say one thing: we are at the point as businesses and as consumers, we have so much data in front of us from the minute we open our eyes every day, no matter what you do. If you are a homemaker that stays at home, you've got all these video outlets, these social outlets. We are, and I feel it every day. Sometimes I'm just exhausted over the amount of data that I have to take 5 minutes here, take a look, 5 minutes here, take a look, 5 minutes here, take a look. We need to do that, as Kareem said, in a meaningful way. And this is where Microsoft can take the lead. They've always battled with Apple. Apple right now is behind as far as we know. You know, right now they can say, hey, we have it. We have it on all your devices. Copilot came out for Android a couple of weeks ago over the holidays. They kind of slipped that out there. You know, we can group all this together where consumers can get everything they need in one place and then parse that data properly with command, and then you walk away with just what you need and none of the fluff, fluttery, and nonsense that goes with it.
Yeah. And then we're gonna do our last one so we can get you guys out of here. I know it's a long one, but this is our first of the year. We don't expect them to be this long going forward, but we're gonna end on a gaming note. What are our 2024 predictions for the Xbox gaming division? I know I want to start off with a new console. Surprisingly, people might say, "Hey, you're an idiot," but I do believe that there have been rumors about a rounded Xbox X uh, Series S console, akin to the Mac trash can, so to speak. So imagine a round version of your Xbox Series X, but in the vein of a Mac. What was it? What was that Mac called?
It was the Mac Pro. It was the Mac Pro was the trash can, and I don't think you're too. And I don't want to interrupt you here, but I don't think
No,
you're
no, you're good.
too far fetched because every Xbox except maybe the first one has always had that betweener. That's what I call it. That iterative model that changes something about the console. Like the Xbox One had the regular model. Then it had the S model. I've still got one in my game room that had the S model that was a little thinner. It was white in color. And the catch was they added a few little features that made you think about buying it because that was the time that 4K streaming was just getting out there. And that box had the ability to 4K stream, and it had the ability, if your TV was appropriate, to upscale certain games a little bit. So I don't think it's far fetched for what you have on the screen here for our viewers to see that we're going to see something from Xbox. They've never had one set of consoles go from the beginning of a life cycle to the end. There's always been something in the middle.
For those of you listening, this isn't a hand-drawn sketch of mine with stick figures. This is actual leaked slides from that were acquired or that were acquired during the Microsoft Activision investigation. So Microsoft's own renderings of what they want for the next version, or what they call the Xbox Series X refresh, which they are codenaming Brooklyn. It's supposed to be delivering 4K Gen 9 console gaming with more internal storage, faster Wi-Fi, reduced power, and more immersive controller, and what they call a more beautiful design, which elevates all of the digital experience on the Microsoft ecosystem. This isn't an official slide somewhere. Now, I don't know if it's officially going to happen, but they had some marketing person come up with this. They had some designer come up with this. This was time and effort invested into this. So this is what I'm saying. This thing will come out, unlike the, I don't know, streaming stick that we've all been catering, wanting for the last like 4 or 5 years. We will get this thing. The other thing I'm predicting is unfortunate server closures. Microsoft is not amongst the fray, so to speak. Maybe not necessarily Sony, but things closing like Stadia. Unfortunately, I expect to see more of these because it's these smaller companies aren't able to leverage Azure type business or Google Cloud type business or AWS type business in order to stay afloat. So expect to see more of these game streaming cloud services kind of wind down, unfortunately, as we go into this summer and this fall. Uh, the last thing, and I'll let you run with this one, is a huge Activision game, Xbox Game Pass drop, like something that finally consolidates this acquisition and helps push Microsoft forward beyond Sony and beyond Nintendo. What do you think?
Another podcaster brought this up, and I don't think this is a bad idea because I hadn't thought about it when it was brought up. I think there could be an Activision add-on to Game Pass because not everybody plays Call of Duty. Call of Duty is well known for being its own entity. We have discussed it till the end of time. Um, I feel like we could see other tiers of Game Pass come out. Like, for example, do you want the existing tier? I know we've got the core tier that's out there that just completely confuses me and everybody else, I think, with what they're trying to do there, where you get 25 titles and you get online access to this one or access to this one. I'm referring to what we call the Game Pass Ultimate. I think you could see an Activision add-on. I don't know that there's one specific title that's going to drop and say, "Wow." I think Starfield was that for Microsoft at least was that wow title last year. I think, we're going to start to see some of the Starfield add-ons. I saw some rumors about that around Christmas time because some players were kind of getting bored with the game and saying, "Hey, you've got all this space to run around, but there's nothing going on with it." I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see the modding community jump in, start to create their own mods, and if there is a big game drop that we know of, and we talked about it on our last podcast of 2023, it's going to be Grand Theft Auto 6. There's the rumors out. We know it's coming. It's been announced. There's talk of Xbox version coming at one point, PC version coming at another point, and I'm gonna throw one more rumor idea in the pot. We've got the Asus ROG Ally. We have the Lenovo Legion portable handheld. We've already seen we know one is coming next week, supposedly from MSI, and I'm sure somebody else that we don't know about yet has one out there. Is this where Microsoft puts something in the pot? You know, how
Ideally, it's you and I've talked ad nauseum about is a Xbox game app that runs as a skin over all of these UIs to consolidate all of this that allows people to easily play and get into all of the games in their library in order to buy, to watch videos, to research, to stream. If they could figure out a way to take the simplification of the Xbox current UI, place it on these handheld devices. They don't need to make one themselves. It'd be nice if they did, but we know the Surface division is, kind of picking and choosing where to make its, where to take its shots, and I don't think gaming is one of them right now. If they made this software to run on all of these handheld devices and that be what people are introduced to right off the bat, I think that would be huge. It would help the market. Again, it's admittedly a very niche, small market, but it would help that market become acquainted with Xbox, the Xbox branding, the Xbox library, Game Pass in general. People will be willing to buy these devices and sign up for $30, $40 Game Pass if that means that they can easily access those games and perhaps maybe stream from it, record from it, do or engage with social media with these, through this UI very easily. And they never have to see Windows, tweak Windows, play with Windows. They can. It's there in the background, but they never have to interact with it. I think that'll be huge for them.
I think that'll be huge, and I also think you touched on something there that I actually saw somebody do over the holidays, and I was thoroughly amazed by it. Some of all of these handhelds except for the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck kind of sits over there in its own Steam ecosystem and does its thing. But the ones we're talking about are powered by Windows. Well, folks, so far they have USB-C ports on them. I
Mhm.
saw one over the holidays. A friend of mine took and plugged in a USB-C dock. He plugged in a monitor. He plugged in a keyboard, and he plugged in a headset. Yes, he had gaming on a big screen. I understand that. What he also had was a fully functioning computer that he was able to edit video on, that he was able to do his work on. So, as these things improve, does our computer and gaming console or gaming device meet in the middle somewhere. Now, this is a whole other discussion for a whole other podcast. Microsoft has got to do a better job of making the interface better on those devices for Windows for that to work. But as we've been talking and we mentioned before we started, this MSI device that we're supposed to see next week is Intel powered. That's the first Intel powered portable gaming device that I've seen that is made by a mainstream maker. I'm sure there's a third party vendor out there that's got something already that is Intel powered. But this is the first mainstream maker that is coming up with one that's Intel powered. The ROG Ally and the Lenovo are AMD powered. So we're getting closer. Do we get to the point that you have one device that covers both your computing needs and your gaming needs? I wouldn't be surprised to see, maybe we don't see it at CES, but maybe June, July, we start hearing rumors of version 2 of some of these handhelds coming. I wouldn't be surprised to see that because the hardware, as we've mentioned in our previous topics, the hardware is just going to continue to get better. And AMD and Intel are fighting neck and neck and nose to nose on this stuff, which is good for consumers because they're putting out the products faster. They're putting out better products. I'm going to go out on a limb and say by the time we do this podcast next year, we have either got it in our hands or we know where the portable PC is coming from.
I have nothing else to say. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for sticking with us for as long as you did, or jumping in whenever you did and hanging out. We will see you again next week. Hope you guys had a restful, peaceful holiday because it looks like this year is going to be very busy with news, with all kinds of events. We will be there. Keep it locked on our social medias, which we're on Instagram, we are on Threads, we're still on X. Some people are. We're on YouTube. Where can people find you if they want to talk to you personally about stuff?
Yeah, feel free, folks. I love it. David PHA 1978. That is on X, and I have made this promise to my partner over here several times. He's got to remind me. I will get on Threads with the same handle as well.
You can find me on Threads at Kareem Anderson, which is because it's attached to Instagram. If you're still looking for me on X, I'm at Bindhead1. Again, we want to thank you. Get out of here. Go do something with your lives now that you've been entertained and fully educated on Microsoft's past and present. Bye.
Bye, guys.